Thao taught Michel Desmarquet during his trip to Thiaoouba that a human being is made up of 9 bodies, and animals are made up of 3. This makes us a unique being that has a special role in the universe. On the topic of role, you can read these 3 books, or watch my video where I briefly talked about this topic. In this video, I want to pay attention to 9 human bodies. For starters, here's the list of all those bodies: physical, physiological, fluidic, astral, also known as soul, psychic, astropsychic, psychotypical. The last 2 were never mentioned by Thao. Various people have suggested that the aura and the etheric field may be the last 2 bodies, but personally I am not ready to accept those thoughts as truth. At this point in time, I consider auras and the etheric field as a component of one of the human bodies. For example, the etheric field can be part of the fluidic body. We know well that there are organs in our physical body: heart, liver, kidneys, stomach, etc. All of them have a role in maintaining the life of our organism. Some other bodies have also some kind of organs that were also created for a specific purpose. For example, in the fluidic body we have 6 chakras and palantirs. Under certain conditions, we can actually feel the rotation of the chakras, and I say this from personal experience. A couple of times I actually felt the rotation of the chakra, and I remember exactly how that feeling felt fluid, hence the name of the body, apparently. Speaking briefly about palantirs, it has the shape of a coiled spring and reaches the base of the spinal column only in a relaxed state. To relax, it requires sexual intercourse between people of the opposite sex, between whom there is love and spiritual affinity. Only under these conditions will the palantirs extend to the spinal column, transferring an energy and special gifts to the physiological body, which then affects the physical body. The person concerned will experience happiness in sexual enjoyment that is far greater than normal. This process can also bring about vast improvements in the person's physical body by way of his fluidic body. And there are opinions that chakras can play a role in the generation of the etheric field. By the way, we can learn to see both auras and the etheric field. I know this from my personal experience. Thao also called the first chakra the brain of the fluidic body. That chakra is located between the eyes and 1.5 centimeters above the nose. It looks like all the receptors of the fluidic body, its organs, so to speak, transmit their data to that chakra for processing. As you can see, different bodies can influence each other. Next, I will briefly talk about the astral body, which is also often called the soul. The normal human astral body contains approximately 4 billion trillion electrons. The lifetime of these electrons is approximately 10 billion trillion Earth years. They were created at the moment of creation of the universe. The astral body contains them, and when a person dies, 19% are reunited with the electrons of the universe until nature requires them to form a new body, a new tree or animal, and 81% are reunited with the higher self of the person. The electrons of the astral body exactly mirror the physical shape of a person. Each of these electrons has a memory, and each is capable of storing as much information as is contained in all the books that fill the shelves of an average city library. It's in the astral body that material and spiritual knowledge is recorded, and not in the physical brain. When a person chooses to be born in a new body, the material knowledge is erased in the river of oblivion, but the spiritual knowledge remains. Another role of the human soul is to transfer to its higher self all the sensations that a person experiences during his life in the physical body. Further, some of these sensations will be filtered by the higher selves, and some may possibly reach the etheric ocean that surrounds the superior intelligence. But that's another topic. Regarding the astral body, it's worth saying that we can learn to separate it from our physical body. At the same time, our consciousness, our intellect, will be in the soul. This is logical, since the astral body is a more important body than the physical body. The physical body dies, but the astral body will be with us until the end of our reincarnational path in this universe. This separation of the soul from the physical body is commonly referred to as astral projection. I had little experience of this, but because of the tense facial muscles, I was unable to separate the soul from my head, causing me to fly up and down around it. Nevertheless, I had enough experience to know that the soul really exists. I will note that at that moment I did not feel my physical body, a feeling of, let's say, heaviness that can be inherent to living in a physical body. On the contrary, I felt unusually light, as if I were weightless. During astral projection, people can see and hear the world around them. As far as I know, these sensations are somewhat different from what we experience with our physical eyes and ears. The following is a quote from Thiaoouba, the Golden Planet. Thao was telling Michel about hallucinations, when suddenly a shock of extraordinary violence shook the spacecraft. Thao looked at me with horrified eyes. Her whole face had completely changed, and one could read in it sheer terror. With a dreadful cracking sound, the vessel split into several pieces, and I heard screams from astronauts, as we were all hurled into space. Thao had grabbed hold of my arm, and we were flung through the sidereal emptiness at a giddying speed. I realized, only because of the speed we were traveling, that we were about to cross paths with a comet, exactly like the one we had passed by several hours earlier. I felt Thao's hand on my arm, but did not even think to turn my head in her direction. I was literally mesmerized by the comet. We were going to collide with its tail, that was certain, and already I could feel the terrible heat. The skin on my face was ready to burst. It was the end. As it turned out, Thao created an illusion for Michel to show by an illustrative example that they are really capable of creating illusions for large masses of people if necessary. There are a lot of important details in this quote, and in the subsequent discussion between Michel and Thao that can shed light on the work of various phenomena in the universe. I talked about them in my book and in various videos. Now, the following conversation between Michel and Thao is important. Thao said, "Our physical bodies were in our seats, and we simply separated our, let's call them astropsychic bodies from our physical ones, and from our other bodies." "What other bodies?" Michel asked. Thao replied, "All the others, the physiological, the psychotypical, the astral, and so on. Your astropsychic body was separated from the others by a telepathic system originated in my brain which acts in this case like a transmitter. A direct correlation is established between my astropsychic body and yours. All that I imagined was projected into your astropsychic body exactly as if it was happening." These lines are important for several reasons. First, we get some idea of the role of the human astropsychic body. We can assume that it plays a role in hallucinations and visions. Secondly, Thao clearly stated that their astropsychic bodies were separated from their physical, physiological, psychotypical, astral, and other bodies. The question is, where was their intellect, consciousness? It could be within astropsychic body, but in this case it would mean that the astropsychic body is an even higher or more important body than the astral one. And in this case, it must also be immortal, meaning it must exist at least until the last moments of the existence of the universe. In another version, the intellect remained with all other bodies, while the astropsychic was separated. In this case, it would mean that that body can play the role of a kind of a barrier to hallucinations. Otherwise, why should it be separated to create such visions? Personally, I prefer the first option. I myself have had some experience with hallucinations and visions, and I've drawn several conclusions from that experience. For me, visions and hallucinations have the same basis. The only difference is that I call visions the positive experience of illusions, and hallucinations are the illusions that were negative in nature. For example, when I saw the It monster several times in front of my closed eyes. In one of my visions, Thao's face appeared in the middle of the day in front of my open eyes. Thus, it appears that that vision was as if superimposed on top of the data that was coming at that moment from my eyes. As an analogy, I can mention different layers in a graphic editor, where you can overlay an image with a transparent background on top of another image. Mostly my short visions happened in front of my closed eyes. I talked about that experience in the book and also in several videos. Now, I'm going to talk about my thoughts on how I see the whole process of creating the mental picture, or sensory experience, in our mind. I will warn you that we still have a lot to learn about our body and about life in general. I may be wrong in my hypothesis. By receptors, I mean everything that receives any data and sends it further for processing. For example, the eyes and ears of the physical body. I have already mentioned the analogy of layers in a graphics editor. Since different bodies can have several detectors or sense organs, in our example we will have 9 folders that correspond to 9 human bodies. We add 5 layers to the physical body folder: vision, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. Sometimes a 6th sense organ is also added, the vestibular apparatus, which is responsible for sense of balance and position in space, and for acceleration. As I said, during an astral projection, a person is able to at least see and hear. We will add 2 corresponding layers to the astral body folder. I will also add 5 layers to the astropsychic body folder, reflecting all the feelings that we have in the physical body. In the fluidic body folder, I'll add 1 layer, as I personally could only feel the spinning chakras. That experience is most similar to touch, and therefore I will write touch. But perhaps it would be worthwhile to come up with a new word for the sensations that we experience with our fluidic body. The psychic body also has its own layers, which also influence our final sensory experience. I think that the data coming from all the receptors of all 9 human bodies, either immediately or after being processed by the brain of the corresponding body, enters one single body, which is the most important. There, all this data is combined into the final mental picture, into sensory experience. This is what we see, hear, feel, etc. And we are the intellect, that very infinitesimal part of the superior intelligence. In our analogy, we could put all 9 folders in a folder called intelligence mind. The meanings of these 2 words are different, but for the sake of this topic, I'll combine them. Perhaps the superior intelligence also has some kind of mental picture from the entire life experience of all beings in the universe. If that's the case, then we could make one last folder called the superior intelligence, which contains all the individual beings in the universe that the superior intelligence receives sensations from. The exact process, as I said, is not yet known. All this needs to be scientifically studied, but unfortunately, many scientists will not do this, while we have a plague of skepticism. However, here are a few thoughts. We know that the superior intelligence had an imagination even before the creation of the universe. This is logical. Otherwise, how could it have invented the universe at all? Perhaps the imagination somehow plays a role in this process. But then I had a very good experience with the imagination, and I can say for sure that the difference between the imaginary world and the reality that we feel with complete clarity of mind is huge. This, in fact, is one of the reasons why the superior intelligence created the world, the scenario of which he knows by heart. Sensory experience is strikingly different from imaginary experience. This topic is very interesting in itself. How is it that, thanks to the material world, we have such vivid sensations that are impossible without it? Next thought. It is possible that the astropsychic body may be the final body, where the data is formed into a whole, in case my early conclusions from Michel's illusionary experience are correct. After all, if we can really separate the astropsychic body from all the others, including the astral one, while the intellect remains with the astropsychic body, then it is logical that either it or another body, which perhaps is part of the astropsychic, should be the last stage in construction of all sensory experience. The fact that illusions, visions, and hallucinations can be experienced by people as very real experiences also adds things for consideration regarding this hypothesis. Let's go further. Some of those 9 bodies are mortal, while others will exist until the end of the universe. Physical and physiological bodies are temporary, they die. The astral body, the soul, does not die. We keep that body until the end of our reincarnational cycle in the universe. Then the psychic body, as Thao taught us, is part of the astral and therefore does not die either. And from Thiaoouba prophecy, it's understood that the psychic body can also hold some knowledge or data, which also migrates into a new life. It's also interesting to note the fact that at the death of the physical body, 19% of the electrons of the astral body go to the universe, and they can be used to create a new body, animal or plant. Those electrons have a memory at least until they are recycled. And the interesting thing here is if life and decisions of a person in which those electrons were once located somehow affect the new body that they help to create. For example, an animal. But this is a separate topic. From my experience with lucid dreams, I believe that other bodies may also be composed of particles, vibrations of infinite space that are much smaller than atoms. What scientists have studied so far is the atomic component of the world, but I think there are other, smaller particles and vibrations out of which a world can be created, which is used for creating dreams, hallucinations, and other things. In conclusion, I'll note that we have a relatively deep knowledge of the workings of 2 bodies out of 9. 2 out of 9 is about 22%. If we assume that other bodies are as complex as the physical one, then it turns out that our civilization knows about less than 20% of all material knowledge regarding the complete human being. Of course, this is a very rough estimate, but the fact is that we still have a lot to learn. That's all I wanted to share with you for now. Thank you and all the best.